So what's riskier, buying a business or having a job? A year and a half ago, I left my high-paying job to buy a business. I thought that was the right move. And less than a year later, I had to declare bankruptcy. And that bankruptcy left me with $1 million in personally guaranteed debt because of that business. So today, we're going to talk about risk, because I'm seeing a lot of social media posts about how it's really risky to have a job and how it's much safer to buy a business and how jobs are inherently risky because you can be fired at any time. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. And I would argue that they're completely different risk profiles. So first and foremost, let's talk about the risk involved in having a job. So when you have a job, a W-2 or a 1099, but we're going to focus mostly on W-2 employees. When you have a job in the United States of America, you can be fired at almost any time for almost any reason. That's just a fact of life. And so you need to understand that. The years of like our parents having jobs for 25 years and then, retiring, or 40 years at a different place, those days are gone. And I think we all understand that. But what has really happened is that as things really sped up, not only do we stay at our jobs for shorter periods of time, but we move from job to job faster than we used to. Now it's common, especially in tech, to see people move from job to job after 2 or 3 years, like hopping around pretty quickly. And so that's normal and that's common. And at the same time, employers are becoming much more nimble when it comes to increasing or decreasing their workforce, depending on what they need. And so in the United States, your employer can fire you whenever they want. And that's a real risk. So as the employee, you need to understand that I need to be constantly upgrading myself. I need to be constantly getting better, constantly learning more. I need to be diligent in saving money, whether that's in tax-sheltered retirement accounts or in savings accounts, knowing that I could be laid off without notice, at any time, and I need to be able to take care of myself and my family until I get a new job. So that's a certain level of risk. Now you can take that a step further and say, all right, well, the risk could be higher because if I work a job for decades on end, then at the end of that time, maybe there's a risk that I'm not going to save enough money to retire. That's a very real thing. We see it all around us, right? And so those risks are compounded if, say, a family member has a tragic accident, or my home burns down, or any number of catastrophic events happen that take decades of your savings and your plan and just wipes it out. And so, we see right now, like, what 2/3 of Americans have at least $10,000 of medical debt. Like, this is a real thing. And so understanding that you could be doing all the right things and being laid off by your employer or having some black swan tragedy could happen to you and completely ruin decades of preparedness. And so that is a much bigger level of risk. And so lately it's become very trendy to say, that W-2s are way too risky. Being an employee is way too risky. You need to diversify yourself. And I think that makes sense. Whether that means having a side hustle or, maybe building a small business of your own and trying to generate other types of income to help offset, your main source of income, which is typically your job. But lately, there's been a huge push of people to buy a business as a way to reduce that risk. And I would argue that that's a fundamentally different risk profile. Here's what I mean. It's not that you're removing the risk of being an employee. It's that you're stepping out of the risk that I just described into a completely different world of risk. When you decide to move from employee to owner, when you decide to buy a business, inherent in that is the word buy. You bought a business, which means you paid cash for something and you acquired an asset. And I don't mean to be cute, but what that means is if you did that, you most likely did not have that cash. You had to borrow it. This is a leveraged buyout, which means you have levered up money to buy a business. And as a result, you have to make payments on that business. So one of the fundamental flaws I see when first-time buyers are interested in buying a business, they'll start looking at businesses and they'll say, oh, this business has $500,000 in seller's discretionary earnings, or SDE. Oh, this business has $750,000 in SDE. Oh, this business has $1 million in EBITDA. And what they're completely missing is that it won't have that when you buy it. The moment you buy that business and you put debt on it, and you put that debt service coverage ratio up to 1.5 or 1.7, or God, if you go below that, go like to 1.2 or lower, like 45% of that cash flow is out the door because you have to now pay the debts to your lender. So your cash flow is cut in half immediately. And so you really need to understand the risk that you're taking on. And not just the cash flow constraint, but also as a first-time buyer, you're most likely using the SBA 7A program because you don't have any commercial experience. You've never owned a business. You're probably not going to get a commercial loan. You're going to need an SBA loan. And in that regard, you're going to sign a personal guarantee, which means when you buy that business, you are going to sign a personal guarantee that says, I am personally liable for the debt I'm taking on for this business, and you can pierce the corporate veil and come after me personally to recoup that money if necessary. So that is a completely different risk profile than saying, oh, I'm an employee and bad things might happen in the future, which you absolutely need to mitigate against, but there are other options. Insurance is an option. When you buy a business, I think there are some people who offer like PG, like personal guarantee insurance, not a big thing, but at the same time, you're taking on the complete risk profile of the business and you're taking that going forward. So yes, you've eliminated the opportunity for you to get fired. You're probably not going to fire yourself. But that said, the financial future is completely in your hands. And for a lot of people, including me, that's an exciting prospect because now I have complete control of my own destiny. I'd rather work hard and, get the fruits of that labor and know that my ceiling is unlimited. But you also need to realize that your floor is also unlimited to an extent. Here's what I do. So, like I said, I bought a business and that business went bankrupt. And as a result, I went through a settlement process, had to liquidate, went through insolvency, and lost all my financial assets because I signed a personal guarantee. I had to sell my home, had to sell all my stuff, and that sucks. I didn't declare personal bankruptcy for my own reasons, but that still left me with several $100,000 of debt that I still have that I have to pay off. And so this is what you're missing. If you're an employee, you can leave your job, you can get laid off from your job, but you never owe money to your employer. You're never on the hook for their equity. So if your employer goes under, if your employer goes out of business, or if your employer fires you, you as the employee, you never are responsible for the capital stack and the debt of that business. But you're also not getting anything on the upside. You're also not, really experiencing the positive impact of the growth of the business, unless you're actually buying stocks. So you really have to understand the risk that you're walking into. When you buy the business, you're taking on the full risk profile of that business. You're putting all of your assets into a single asset, your business. And not only just one asset, you're not diversified. You're putting all your assets into one big asset. And then you're personally guaranteeing that asset. And then that asset on its own, is the riskiest and most illiquid asset that there is. And by illiquid, I mean, how fast can you turn your asset into cash? And so fundamentally, we understand what this means. If you own a home, theoretically, how fast could you sell that home? Under a normal market, 45 to 95 days, maybe, right? If you want to just try starting selling it today. But we all know that markets change. So sometimes it's a lot longer. Sometimes it's shorter. How fast could you sell your stocks and bonds? Overnight, probably. How fast could you get your money out of a savings account? Same day, most likely. But when it comes to a small business, the level of liquidity just doesn't exist. Over 95% of small businesses do not sell at all, much less the owner wanting to sell them. And so the idea that you're going to get to a point to where you can liquidate or cash out of your business, while possible, it's not something you can bank on. When you buy a business, you have to assume that you're going to be in that business for 10, 15, 20 years. You have to assume that. Now, I hope that this works out really well for you. I hope that you're able to build that business into something that's sustainable, something that's growing. You can hire management, you can make it a real tangible asset, and then you can either be able to step away from the business and have it operating with the management team without your direct involvement, or you can sell it. That's something you can do. But even then, if you have the most sellable business in the world, those selling windows, it's still going to take 90 days to close. Like, it still takes time to sell a business. The buyer's going to do their due diligence. And so understanding the risk and the lack of liquidity in your investment is absolutely critical. And then let's talk about, just the risk to you personally. When you sign a personal guarantee, like I said, if that business goes under, you lose everything. So you get to start back at square one. So I'm not saying this to say that you shouldn't buy a business. Lots of people buy businesses. I think it's a fantastic opportunity for the right person in the right business. But what I do think is that if you think that buying a business is your golden ticket to get out of the rat race, or is the best way for you to hedge your risk against having a W-2 or having a job, and being able to build assets for yourself, I would argue that you've been on social media for too long. If you want to diversify yourself, which I think you should absolutely do, and if you want to build assets, which you absolutely should, then you can put your money into tax-advantaged savings accounts, tax-advantaged 401ks or IRAs, into health savings plans. You can put your money in stocks and ETFs and bonds. You can buy treasuries. You can buy gold. If you want to be a little bit more risk aggressive, you can buy property. You can buy rentals. Lots of people invest in real estate. If you really wanted to invest in small businesses and take your risk profile back a little bit, you could invest in other people's businesses. Like, you could do that. People do that all the time. Again, incredibly illiquid asset, but you could invest in a small business. You don't have to throw all your eggs into the I'm going to own a business basket. So, with that being said, is it riskier to have a business or to buy a business, or is it riskier to have a job? I would argue that neither one is riskier than the other. It really comes down to your risk profile. Are you more concerned that by having your job, you're not going to be able to build the assets you and your family need over the long term? If you knew that you had 30, 40 years to, build up your assets and, save money, buy stocks, buy property, diversify, do you think you could get there? Do you think you could put insurance policies in place to protect protect yourself from like black swan events that could impact you? That's definitely a strategy you can handle. Buying a business is completely different. You're putting yourself in the driver's seat, economically, not just from an investment standpoint. You have to be ready to roll up your sleeves and get in the business and work, because at any given day, your employees can quit. Your suppliers can go out of business. Any number of things can happen that can threaten the viability of your business. And when that happens, you are the one who's left holding the bag, because you're the one who signed the personal guarantee for the debt. So that's the risk that you take. And that's not a risk that you can, mitigate by, putting it off on other people. Sometimes people think, oh, well, I'll hire a manager to run the business for me. But then they neglect to realize that the manager has no financial stake in the success of that business. And before you think, oh, I'll give that manager equity, that way they feel like an owner. Yeah, equity's great, but it only gives you the upside. Where's the downside protection? As the buyer, as the owner, you're the only one holding the downside. You're the one holding the debt structure. And so unless your employee is going to help take over some of that debt, which they don't, no one would ever do that, then equity does not foster ownership. It's an incentive to help you work better for future earnings. It doesn't foster ownership. So you really need to think about what happens when you're the owner. And this is a skill set that you have to learn. It's a mindset shift that you have to make. And a lot of people are able to do it. It's not for everyone, and it shouldn't be for everyone. Not every opportunity is for you. And I say that because, right now you look online and everyone says, hey, go buy a business. But maybe that's not the right move for you. Maybe the right move for you is to have a really great corporate career and save your money and invest it wisely. Maybe that's for you. Maybe for you, it's starting your own business because you realize I can create a separate stream of income through maybe something online or some sort of side hustle, and I can test that. And if it fails, it's not a big deal because I put some money into it, but it's not a big deal. It's not gonna be life-changing. It's not like I signed $1 million loan to get this side hustle off the ground. And so you can test it. And if it takes off, great. And if it doesn't, try something else. That's a way that you can mitigate that risk, but still try to have some of that upside. You could definitely try to start your own business. The notion that you need to burn your ships and just go it sounds cool. It sounds exciting. And in my opinion, it's really stupid. You need to do everything you can to maximize your potential upside while minimizing your potential downside. And that's what it means to really assess risk. That's what it means to try to benefit from asymmetrical increases while also making sure you don't lose. And so, one of the famous quotes from Warren Buffett is, how do you win in investing? Rule number 1, don't lose money. But yet I see people every day ready to lose money to jump into business ownership when they've never owned a business, into an industry that they have no experience in, signing a couple $1 million worth of personally guaranteed debt, and they just think it's gonna work. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. That's a lot of risk you're putting on, that you're adding on. And just to take that one step further, if you're gonna search for a business to buy and you're ready and you find a business you like and you're ready to sign for a loan of $3, $4, $5 million to buy that business, but then the idea of paying for a quality of earnings for $25,000, $30,000 before you buy the business, if that makes you feel a little weird, you don't want to do it, I would argue you're not ready to buy the business. The risk is completely different. Like, you're not willing to spend $20,000, $30,000 on a quality of earnings for a business that you're ready to buy for millions? That doesn't make sense. And if your response to that is, I don't have $30,000 for quality of earnings, then my answer would be you don't have the capital required to buy a business. So anyway, that's my assessment of risk. I think that, like many people, I completely agree that, living your life as an employee and is incredibly risky because you're putting your livelihood in someone else's hands. And you have no idea what the future could bring. You have no idea if the stock market's gonna crash or if there's gonna be a tragedy in your family or what could possibly happen to completely destroy and remove your ability to create money and all the savings that you've built up. That was one of the big reasons why I bought a business, because I was ready to have an asymmetrical upside and I want to take control of my financial future. That's not a bad way to look at life. But at the same time, you need to be really clear about the risks of the profile you're taking on. So I hope that's helpful. I hope that really helps you kind of think through the risk and reward between owning a business, buying a business, and having your own job as a W-2 and maybe doing a side hustle on the side. Just because people say it's cool online doesn't mean you have to go do it. Understand what your risk profile is for you personally, what makes the most sense for you, and then find the opportunity that best maximizes your skill sets while minimizing your risk. That's all there is to it. So I hope that helps. Thanks.